we're gonna go over a few keystrokes here, maybe. Um, John, why don't you give us a little, how you used to throw in a little what you call side note. Like for instance, you told us that little trick that isn't listed in voiceover documentation anywhere, that voiceover and the letter X has you switch between activities, right?
Yes.
So is there
Yeah.
any more of those little, quick snippets you could give us?
Well, the Control Option Shift or Caps Lock Shift C will copy the last spoken text to the clipboard. So it's a great little trick to use if you're trying to grab a passcode or, like for the Zoom meeting, for example, right? It stands out because it's how I use it. So I just do the Control Option Shift C, and that will copy the last spoken phrase from voiceover, which was the passcode for this, and then just pasted it into the appropriate field and, hit enter and connect it. So it's a great thing to use if you need to grab a link that you want to send to somebody for a website, or, if you're just cutting and pasting notes. Like one of the things I do for this, we were just, Cliff and I were talking about the Apple device management stuff, is I will use VO Shift C to copy parts of the text and then paste it into notes so that when I teach a client, I have bits and pieces of the text that I can, refer to. So it's a really nice little slick command. A non-voiceover command that people forget is Command Z, which is the equivalent of Alt Z in Windows, where you undo your last action. And that could save you bacon if you've accidentally deleted a file that you didn't intend to, or maybe you deleted text from a document that you didn't, mean to do, or you pasted text in the wrong place in a document. Command Z will undo, and it does, as you keep doing it, it will undo the last action, etc. And by the way, it also takes advantage of the new thing in Ventura where you can unsend an email if you didn't mean to send it. And I think it works in text messages too. If you accidentally sent a text message, it was wrong to the wrong person, and you realized at the last second, oops, that wasn't intended for that person. I think that will work as well to undo that action. So those are ones that definitely come to mind as, as far as ones that I use on a regular basis.
Right, and also voiceover keys, which is command. I always say command, control, option, and the letter Z will speak the last spoken phrase.
Yes.
VO keys and the letter S will read the current sentence. Of course, voiceover keys and the letter D will take you to the doc. And you can figure out, or not figure out, but you can get all the little tidbit shortcuts if you just turn on keyboard help and hit key combinations. VoiceOver will give you a lot of great tips and tricks.
Yeah, if you just go
I,
through the alphabet, that's the first thing I try to teach clients to do, is just, to practice with keyboard help, just do via Control Option A, Control Option B, Control Option C, and then just do different combinations of that. And, it's a safe place to try the keyboard combinations without actually doing, anything to the computer itself.
Also, I got an email from somebody asking for us to do a demonstration on mail. I don't have to because it's already on John's podcast show. So if you search for Mac for the Blind and go in there, look at the titles. One of them are entitled Mail. There's another one entitled Safari, and some. We're not going to reinvent the wheel here. It's already been taught. It's already been demonstrated. It's already posted.
Yeah, I
So
break down everything, from the mail view and going through your inbox to how to use the mailbox table, the keyboard commands to reply to all, send. And I think we even talk about mail preferences and signatures as well. So I try to cover, the major aspects of Apple Mail that people, tend to want to use.
Messages is pretty much the same way. If you can use mail, you can use messages because you interact and start a new message, and you can actually reply within a message thread with Command R if you're in messages. So again, those are things that are already posted. Again, just search for Mac for the Blind on YouTube or any podcast app that you use because they're on both. One that I don't think we've gone over yet. We've talked about it, but we haven't showed it. But if I push the whole bottom row on the left, which is Control, Option, and Command, and the space bar, it takes me to. It says the Actions menu, and that will definitely open up actions where no matter where you are. But the one I actually did want to show is voice over keys and the letter and the Shift key, which is Option, Control, and Shift, and it takes me where? It takes me to the Control Center. So the bottom line is, on your Mac, you have the same option that you have on your iOS device, phone, and iPad. If you do voice over keys and Shift and the letter O, that will take you to your Control Center. And in that Control Center, you can toggle Bluetooth, sound. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here.
Yeah, do not
Wi-Fi,
focus, do not disturb,
right?
Wi-Fi,
And
Yeah,
screen
yeah, all
mirroring.
of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
and I will
Yep.
warn you, and John's gonna laugh when I say this, but I will warn you, when you get to Wi-Fi, do not, and I repeat, do not, if you're using a Bluetooth keyboard or headset, VO spacebar on it, because it's gonna turn it off, and you will be without speech, without a headset, without a keyboard. What you want to do is add the Command key so you can view options, and then go into it and toggle the ones on and off that you don't want. Because if you VO spacebar and you're using a Bluetooth keyboard, you're gonna have to go find a wired one to reactivate it. Um, in the Control Center, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but everything is there by default. There's just certain things that you can put in your menu, your
Yes.
extras menu.
Yeah, you can, and you can use the system settings under Control Center, I think, to add things as well, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken,
Yes,
just
you
like you
can.
can do in
Right.
iOS.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And some of you that are veterans of the Mac, you remember the menu extras, which you could do with the VOMM, and that still exists. And as Cliff and John just stated, you can customize that. Like, you can show your volume controls in the status menus, which is what they call them, and you can show, battery percentage and these different things. But the control center is newer, and it really is designed very similar to iOS and iPadOS Control Center, and has all of those features and then some listed in there. And just to reiterate what Cliff said, because it's very much the same, to put it in perspective, again, it's like iOS. Think about iOS Control Center. If you come across an icon like Wi-Fi, if you double tap it, it turns off Wi-Fi. If you double tap it again, it turns on Wi-Fi. And if you want to get the additional options, you have to long press it in order to get those additional options. Or I suppose you could use the rotor as well. But really, the long press
And on
is
the
the
Mac, the
standard
long
way
press
of
will be
thinking about it.
equivalent to that VO
To-
Command space bar that
Right,
we've
for
talked
the
about.
that he
action
just
menu.
stated. Yep, exactly. So there's a lot of similarities there.
Matt, why don't you talk a little bit about the correction of spelling, how to get to your choices and choose the one you want, as well as that new feature that they've implemented. I forgot what it's called already.
Right. Okay. All right. So there's several things here. So there are a few different ways to deal with spelling, first of all. And if you are coming from iOS and iPadOS and trying to use all of them together, you do have a misspelled words rotor item. And you also have VO Command E, I believe, just like on the iPad and iPhone, and VO Command Shift E, which will take you to the next or previous misspelling. Now, the most common thing, if you haven't changed your default settings, the most common thing is that it's going to autocorrect and it's going to check spelling as you type. So that's going to mean that for the most part, and of course there are exceptions, but for the most part, if you type something and you have a typo, it's automatically going to be corrected, and you'll hear a little bubble sound, and it will just make the correction.
And that's if you left it, because I'm lazy. I'm not the
Right.
greatest speller in the world. I probably haven't used Braille consistently since the 90s. That really makes me sound old. But anyway, and I let it autocorrect. But if you go into your settings, and this is in your system settings, not, I mean, because you can change it individually on the fly. Like, you can go into mail and go into preferences there and say, okay, I like to use a misspelled word when I talk or I email a certain person, so I'm going to turn off autocorrect off in here. But it'll still be active in text edit pages and messages. But if you go into your system settings, through the dock or the applications folder with utilities, whichever way you choose to do it, and go into keyboard, there is a spelling option in there, and that's going to default across the board unless you change it by app.
Right.
But again, you can change it individually, or you can just leave it like it is. But what Matt's talking about is by default, it's going to automatically change your spelling. But if you have changed it in text edit, don't expect it to be that same way in pages, because it has to be done by app unless you do it in the universal or default area, which is system settings.
Correct. Now, if you are using these autocorrect and quick type features and so forth, just like with iOS, if you get a list of suggestions or even an autofill suggestion, it's the same kind of thing. And, or you delete the punctuation after it and it bubbles and it pops up a list of suggestions. Correct me if I'm wrong, either Cliff or John, you press the down arrow to open that list of suggestions, correct? And then that will bring up, and then you can just enter return or VO space on whichever one you want.
Usually left and right arrows will go through the suggestions, and then you can hit enter to accept one or escape, or you should be able to do like VOW to have it repeated if you missed what it said.
Okay. All right. That's a good tip also. So again, down arrow to open the suggestions list, left and right arrow to move through the suggestions, return or enter to actually to take the suggestion, escape to ignore it, and VOW should work to repeat it. Now, again, this also works with your autofill. And the big thing here, we always talk about this in our iOS class, and we'll say it here again. Leave your hints enabled. If you do not like them because you think they get in the way, you have two choices. You can extend the time that it under voiceover settings, you can extend the time so that you don't have to hear them before you do the next thing, or you can just move on. Like, you can interrupt a hint with your next command. Like, I don't know why anybody is bothered by the hints, because if I don't want to hear a hint, I just press another key. I just do what it is I was going to do.
The first option is what I do. I extended it to, like, I think it's 10 seconds. So VoiceOver knows if I don't continue typing or I sit there, it knows to tell me the hint. But I don't want them off, because Apple they sneak new stuff in all the time.
Yes.
So you don't want to miss anything.
Absolutely.
Right. And that autocorrect, it will tell you, like, VoiceOver will say, press the down arrow to open the list of suggestions or so. Like, that's actually how I learned how you do it, because I didn't read about it. I just listened to it. So you make sure you do that. Now, for those of you who are coming from that other platform, and then I'm talking about Microsoft, if you are coming from that and you're still living in the age where you like an actual spell check dialogue where you can go through a list of spellings and pick the correct one and hit replace or whatever, I believe that you can still activate that with command : Is that the right command, John? Cliff?
Yep. It is.
Yep.
And we had a discussion about this last week. It's command shift. What is the colon when it's not a shift? Is it semicolon?
Semicolon.
Semicolon.
So yeah,
command
so
shift, semicolon or command colon. With,
exactly.
The proper way of saying it.
Right.
Or you could actually do what you've suggested, Matt, in the past, and it's the long way, but you can do it, and you can go in the file menu or the edit menu, arrow all the way down, and then hit spell check or whatever, and it'll do it that way also.
Yes. The one with the ellipsis, I think, is the one that brings up the dialogue, and so that is the old sort of legacy way of doing it, but it's still available. And then there's a brand new voiceover feature that has been added, and it is called Text Checker.
So this is only voiceover? Is that what you're saying? So sighted people can't use this option?
No, this to my knowledge, that is correct. Now, because it's listed under the you have to have keyboard commander turned on.
Right.
So I believe I believe those are voiceover, right? Because
yes.
I was about to ask you, John, is commanders only available if you're a voiceover user?
Yes.
So sighted people cannot use, option T.
Okay.
Well, I mean, of course, because voiceover has to be on for that. So I guess that was a stupid question,
right.
But
I
just want to be clear.
Well, yeah, no, that's a good point. Right. So yeah, your sighted family, friends, or if you're not using voiceover, this is not going to work. This is a voiceover feature. It's called Text Checker. And again, the first step in making sure that you use it, that you can use it, is to have your keyboard commanders enabled. You have to have them enabled. And as long as you haven't changed this, you can use the right option. It has to be the right option key, not the left option key. The
And
right
remember,
option.
not to interrupt you, Matt, but I just want to make sure that they remember it, or if they didn't listen to previous sessions, remember you can toggle keyboard commander on and off with VO, Shift, and the letter K. It's a toggle, so VO Shift K will turn it on, and VO Shift K will turn it back off. Whichever one is on, it's like I said, it's a toggle. So pushing it again will do the exact opposite.
Exactly. And so when you have keyboard commander on and you're in, let's say, a Pages document or your Notes app or a mail message that you're composing, you press right option with the letter D as in Delta, right option D, and it brings up the text checker. And you just navigate through the text checker with VO left and right arrow, VO up and down arrow. And basically what you get is there are 3 columns with VO left and right. You'll move through these. One is misspellings. One is extra spaces between words. And Cliff or John, help me out because I don't have my Mac in front of me. What's the third one? Is it incorrect case, like you didn't capitalize?
It's
capitalize
like, right, capitalization. Right. Yep.
Right. So these are common things that a sighted person would look for. They'd look for the red underlined misspelled words. They'd look for extra spaces.
And I guess, to your point, this being just a voiceover feature, doesn't, John, when a word is misspelled, based on the fact that a sighted user can just scan the document all over, it's got miscorrections in red or a certain color?
Red, yeah.
Okay.
That's right. Which, of course, VoiceOver announces that, too, if you have that enabled. But, this is a quick way of jumping to them. So, again, right option D from within any document. And what you'll do then is you'll VO left and right to move through the choices of either I want to look for misspelled words, I want to look for extra space, or I want to look for case problems. And then when I find that one, I VO up and down arrow, right, to find each incident of the misspelling. When I get to one that I want to work with, it's not going to automatically offer me correction options within that particular text checker. But if I VO space on it, it will actually move my VoiceOver cursor and my insertion point to that incident of the document. I believe it closes the text checker and puts you on that place in the document where you can now use standard options to correct that if you want to delete the extra space, if you want to use your suggestion. And by the way, isn't it also true? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I remember doing this on the Mac. Isn't it also true if you find a misspelled word, you can VO Shift M on that misspelled word and get a list of suggestions that way?
Yeah. Yep.
As long as the word is
highlighted. Yeah.
Yep. So that's another, if you're using the text checker, for example, and you jump to a word that it thinks is misspelled, then all you really need to do, make sure the word is highlighted, VO Shift M. You'll get your list of suggestions. Just VO up and down arrow through them, VO space to select one.
So to be clear, this is not a spell check. This is not a spell checker where you would do the Command Shift : find the word you want, and then hit enter or VO spacebar. This is just designed to show you what's misspelled so you can make the correction if you want to.
Right.
Is that the understanding here?
Yes.
I just want to make sure everybody understands exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I really think it's cool. I really hope they bring that to iOS because it would be neat to be able, it's just a cool feature. I like the idea that you can go through an entire document. We might add an extra space without thinking about it, or, you get fumble fingered and you have 3 letters capitalized instead of just 1 or something, So this is useful for things that a sighted person, it might catch their eye, but it's not necessarily going to be reflected by VoiceOver. Misspelled words will, but that's another thing too. You want to make sure. Now, where's that setting, guys? It's under accessibility. It's in the VoiceOver utility. Let's just start there. It's in the VoiceOver utility.
What are we looking for?
And the setting that tells VoiceOver to say when a word is misspelled, is that under?
Yes, it's under voice.
I was about to say verbosity and then
text.
Verbosity and then text, right?
Text, yep.
Right. Yep. And so that's where you're going to make sure that's turned on so that as you're reading a document, it will say misspelled word or something like that.
I was just about to mention that. Last week, I went through, me and John touched on a few of these settings in VoiceOver utilities. And one of the options is to speak it or to play a sound or do nothing. I recommended to have to speak it because number one, John, that sounds not very loud.
Right. It's kind of subtle.
Right. So
So
it's
like a
almost
little
Right,
pointless.
chirp.
right,
So I
right.
recommend having to speak it because even if you miss it, voiceover, if you go back to that word, it's going to do it again.
Correct. Correct. So that's I think that's all I really have to say about the text checker. I mean, it's pretty simple, but just an added little bonus, feature that I think is a real nice thing.
And for
It
people that
really
don't
is.
know or haven't subscribed to the podcast show yet, there is a demonstration on Pages already up there that me and Matt did last year. It's still relevant. Nothing has changed from what we talked about. We're not teaching you how to write a book. We're not teaching you how to write a script for Paramount Pictures. We're just teaching you how to edit some text, enter it, format it a little bit, maybe do some margins, and show you how to do the print layout, and that's about it. If you want further stuff than that, then you know how to reach us for some paid training.
Can you kind of explain drag and drop for me again and why you might want to use it?
That's an interesting
Well,
one because
yeah.
I mean, there's really no instance, I guess, where I use it on a daily basis. I might use it once a month. And Matt, last week when we talked, or 2 weeks ago when we talked about it, and you demonstrated, the old the mouse down and mouse up command. I went and tested, John, the old way of doing it back all the way to Lion, where you do VO comma and VO period to drop, and it actually worked.
Did they actually fix it? Because
I guess it actually worked.
That one, I never really got that one to work.
Yeah,
very
neither
well,
did
so
I. I always
resorted to the
stay.
other
I
one.
do it the way Matt
Just
was
stay with the
talking
other one.
about. Yeah.
But Jenny, I think the thing is there aren't many, but occasionally
Okay.
there are situations where it's the only way to do something. So the example where I demonstrated last week or 2 weeks ago was dragging a song onto a GarageBand track in part of a GarageBand project. That is literally the only way to do that, is to do the drag and drop. And the same thing with what is it, rearranging mailboxes in a list, Cliff? Is that the other one?
It used to be necessary to do it that way, but now you can just VO Shift M and move them up and down
Okay.
within their list.
What
there's
about
an option
what
in there,
about
yeah.
what about ringtone creation and
Yes,
dragging it onto?
well, not creation, but dragging them into the Finder to put on your device if you don't have Walter Pro, which I, again, as y'all know by now, I'm lazy, so I find an app to do stuff. But yeah, you would want to drag and drop a ringtone into the Finder in your device's area of where the ringtone is, and that's another instance where you need to use drag and drop.
Right. So Jenny, I think
Oh.
on an everyday basis, it's probably not essential, but you might run into something where it's the only way to do it.
And I
And
also
then
saw a post on
that
the list yesterday, or maybe it was earlier today, that somebody said they were filling out a form for a job application and it wanted them to rearrange certain items into a different list. And that's an instance, I guess, where you would need to drag and drop also if it's a form or something.
Okay.
If it will work.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Well,
While
thank
while we
you.
have you unmuted because we didn't get to cover
Uh-huh.
it, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to catch up with you because of both our work schedules.
Right.
But why don't you tell us a little bit about the Braille display? Have you used it with your Mac, and have you only which one do you use with your Mac, if any?
I use the Focus 40 with my Mac.
Now, when you had the Mantis, did you use that with the Mac at all?
Yes.
Which
Yes.
one do you prefer?
I prefer the 40 over the Mantis because the keyboard commands are so different.
Okay, but they are.
You could,
But you just go into system settings, pair it, and you're done, right? There's no extra hoops you got to jump through to pair it.
you have to do it through the voiceover
Yeah, you
utility.
do it through the voiceover utility on the Braille display.
Oh, do
On
you?
the
Okay. Well,
Braille
I've never
display.
done it on the.
Yes.
When I used my Mantis with it, I was lazy and I just plugged it directly in the USB and
Yeah,
whatever.
I mean,
But
Oh,
that's
yeah, you can do that
ultimately the
too.
easiest way. Of course, the Cliff way.
Yeah. Yeah. But Braille works really well with the Mac. I haven't had any problems with it when I have used it.
what
There
about
are
the
still
cursor
some
tracking?
commands I'm
Like,
trying to figure out how to use,
does the cursor
um,
follow what VoiceOver is saying if you choose to use voice with it? Because me, when I use the Braille display with my phone or my Mac, I turn VoiceOver off. What am I going to use Braille for if I got the voice in my ear? That's the point
right,
of it for
right, that
me
works,
anyway.
yes. That
Okay.
works. You can still do that, yes.
And to be clear, for anybody who might not have ever used a braille display with any device, you don't turn voiceover off. You mute speech, correct?
Yes,
Correct.
absolutely.
Okay. For anybody who's using the Mac, a year, 6 months, 2 years, you probably haven't even scratched the surface. But the one thing I will tell you, and John, I'll tell you the same thing. If you're coming from that other platform, which I have to use for work, so I get the commands mixed up all the time, so I have no choice. But if you're planning on making the Mac your full-time machine and you're ready to just dump Windows, my suggestion is to get it out of your house, because if it's in your house and you get frustrated with what the Mac and you can and cannot do, you're gonna always run back to it to save yourself, and that's not something you want to do. You want to learn the Mac. I've been using Mac for just shy of 14 years now. I didn't get familiar or comfortable enough with my Mac until I was probably 5 years in. I finally dumped Windows after 5 years. I didn't have a PC in my house, but I did have an Intel, John, that you could still load up the Infusion on and have a virtual machine. But now I haven't used Mac or app or Windows in almost 6 years now, except for work. But as for a personal device, Mac is where it's at, as they say.
How do I switch from app to app? That's one question. And instead of going to minimize whatever, close, is there a command key to just close each window?
In an app, or I was about to say in an individual app, or the whole app?
Everything.
So like if you want to close the whole thing, Command Q is what you want.
Okay.
And to go from app to app is Command Tab. And if you want to switch between windows within an app, so like say you got 7 pages open in Safari, you want to use Command. No, is it Command?
Command accent.
Or is it Control? No, Control is to turn the pages. So yeah, it's Command accent, which is right above the Tab key, to go between windows. If you want to go between tabs or turn pages, so to speak, it's Control Tab. That's a weird one because most Mac keyboards only have a control key on one side of the keyboard. I'm lucky enough to have one that has a control key on both sides, and if you have the extended Mac keyboard, you do too. But people who are using a laptop layout, there's only going to be a control key on one side. So you don't have to reach across. I would just use my thumb and index finger to do Control Tab, but to turn the pages, and that works the same way in any app actually. So if you are in an app and you want to go between and you got different pages you want to turn, versus a tab, then you can just use Control Tab. I use it a lot in mail because I go between like 3 or 4 different emails when I'm trying to copy and paste information. But yeah, between apps is Control Tab. Between windows is command. Or I'm sorry, between apps is Command Tab. Between pages with windows within the app is Command accent, and to turn pages it's Control Tab. Again, if you have any more questions, concerns, want something demonstrated, want to know how to do something, it's support@stirredup.com or support@ttjtech.biz. That's BIZ. And remember, stir is spelled with a U. STURITUP. Thanks for joining, everybody, and have a good one.